Well, welcome. I think the way we're going to do this, everyone here has such sort of unique perspectives on the mega trends that affect our competitiveness that it'll sort of be a one-on-one conversation a little bit, and then if we want, we can open it up if there's time. But we'll start with you, Sam, and I know you specifically, in terms of mega trends, want to talk about manufacturing and how competitive we are as a manufacturer. I guess you would know at Deere. So what are you doing in terms of manufacturing? Are you building factories and employing people in the United States or abroad?
Yes, yes. We're
Which one more?
investment-wise, 60% of our capital investments in the U.S. In terms of employment, it would be the reverse. 60% of the employment gains would be outside of the U.S. Most of that's because the type of jobs that we're investing in the U.S. are jobs that require a lot of capital associated with it. They're more highly skilled jobs, and by definition, there's not as much manual work, where if you're in China or India, you don't have that level of same investment to support it, so you'll have more people. But we are definitely investing in the U.S., but it's in existing facilities. So, for example, we have the largest by tons produced foundry in the world here in the U.S., and we just finished a $200 million modernization plan there. So,
do you have trouble finding the people that you need to fill the American factories?
It varies. Certainly, the person, the more the skill level, the harder it is to find. So when we talk about skilled trades, electricians, for example, it's harder. Finding the person to begin on the shop floor, in most areas, that has not been difficult due to what's been going on in the economy, and we've been able to retain the people. But you can see it on the horizon that it's going to get more difficult all the time, just because we don't have the number of people that have at least, let's say, a community college level of education.
So it's an education issue. I mean, why is it? Why is there a skill mismatch from your vantage point?
There is part of it is there is a view that the type of jobs that are in manufacturing are not as desirable, so less and less people are really aspiring to be in that area. I think we in industry have a role to play. We have a role to play in causing that and a role to play in correcting that. So that's part of the issue there, no doubt. For a long period of time after the Great Recession in 08-09, with the lack of demand, there's been a lot of people that have kind of moved out of the workforce from that standpoint, and it's going to take some effort on the part of all of us to get people interested again in those type of opportunities.
You mentioned you were building abroad. I have here that in the past few years, Deere has built about half a dozen plants, major manufacturing facilities outside the United States. Is that a comment on the U.S. competitiveness?
No. Actually, we have one of our combines that we make, a large combine. We make it here. We make it in Horizontina, Brazil. We make a similar product in Mannheim, Germany, Zweibrücken, Germany, and a similar product in our factory up in Heilongjiang, China. And if you were to take the combine coming out of our East Moline factory and ship it to Argentina, and take the same product from our factory in Brazil and ship it to Argentina, the landed cost from our factory in East Moline is less. So we are cost competitive in a lot of areas. What people fail to recognize, though, is, for example, in Brazil, there are protectionist barriers that we have to make it there or else we can't sell it. China, there's a similar situation. The market's big enough, you have to be there or else they're not going to let you sell it. So a lot of these places where we go, it's either because of that, or a place like India, the market is 600,000 tractors. It's a totally different tractor than what we have here, and there would be no way to ever be cost effective about building it here and shipping it there. So it's driven by the demands of the local marketplace and the size of the opportunity.
What do you find in terms of quality of the people, of the product, in both abroad factories and here at home?
First off, if you, what we aspire to have, especially if it's a greenfield site, if we closed your eyes and then brought you into our factory in India or brought you into our factory in Brazil and then opened your eyes, you would think you're no different than any factory we have in the U.S. We try to use same standards, same environmental standards, safety standards. Everything is, we try to make sure that it's the same consistent quality level. And so quality is something that you should never compromise, and we don't, and there's no problem with it. Relative to the workforce themselves, there are some differences. What you try to do is you try to create a culture inside your facility that really becomes a Deere workforce as opposed to an Indian workforce or a Brazilian workforce. And if you can do that, you can get the same quality level. I will say that, as I mentioned last night, I think the major difference that we see here that is a benefit to productivity here compared to some areas, in the U.S. you can build a much more inclusive workforce than you can in any of these other places. It's just much more difficult to bring in individuals from many different cultures and get them to really form and gel in a place like China or even in a place like Brazil compared to what you can do in the United States. And that becomes a real positive in terms of creating that highly aligned workforce.
I do want to sort of bring everybody into the conversation since we're all up here. I mean, it's a nice way to sort of set the scene for the manufacturing landscape. Jim, maybe you could tell us a little bit about sort of your mega trend. I know you're watching jobs, quality of education in terms of training jobs, and what you found at Gallup recently, and sort of set that stage for us, and then we can all join.
Well, maybe I'll say something that kind of complements what Sam said about the U.S. workforce. The guy that founded our company is a pretty famous academic, Dr. George Gallup. But he really wasn't a pollster as much as he was always trying to figure out and gauge what the will or the great American dream was. And so that started 80 years ago. But what he found over the years is what Americans wanted was peace, freedom, to pray to the God they wanted, to have a family, and all that kind of stuff. But that's what's brought us up to about the last 10 years. There's been a huge shift very recently where the great American dream changed. So it's no longer peace, no longer freedom, no longer family and all that. It's changed to having a good job. That sounds subtle if you just say that, but it changes all the demographics of America. And so since that's the number one will of 300 million people, young people get married later than they ever have, or they don't get married at all. And so then that changes birth rates. So now people have fewer kids. You know, my old neighborhood, anybody that's my age, it was nothing to have, 4, 6, 7 kids. But now people have fewer kids or they don't have any kids at all. But to his point, now we got to change how we manage because human development is occurring more in the workplace than it is in the last 280 years or whatever it is of the great will. Okay, so there you have that. There's 250 million adults in America, and there's 100 million real jobs, which is about 43%. That's not very good. So if you said, how many full-time jobs are there to adults? The answer is about 43%. That's a number from this town. That's the lowest it's been in 40 years. So when you say, oh, the employment's getting better, you could also say, well, I got this data over here that says it's getting worse. And that one that's getting worse is also the great American dream, and that's to have a good job. So what Gallup did is we tried to figure out how many people are actually experiencing, of the 100 million in real jobs, the great American dream or human development. And by the way, it's anything but satisfaction. That's just a huge management mistake. Universities are teaching it wrong. People don't want satisfaction. But if you do call them into your office, like let's say Sam I call him in and I say, we want to satisfy you, Sam. What do you want? Well, now he says, well, I want a latte machine. I heard that Jim has a company car. Why does he have one? Why don't I? And Sara has a latte machine. How the hell did she get that? You see the relationship that he and I are establishing? That ruins companies and it ruins workplaces. And if you do a really good job of that, Fortune magazine will give you an award and say you're one of the best workplaces. But we're going down the wrong path with that, because what people are really saying is, I want to go to a job where I'm doing something where I think I have a life that matters. That's a big, big, big sociological shift. So Gallup asked those 100 million people, and we did have, the samples were millions and millions and millions, how many of them have that? The answer is 30%. So this morning, only 30 million people got up and came to work, and we actually delivered the great American dream. 50% are just showing up, you know, lining up lunch and trying to get through the day. 20% of them are really miserable, and they're awful employees to have. Gallup calls them actively disengaged, which only a Gallup analyst would come up with. So it's a euphemism for an awful, miserable employee. But I asked one of our analysts, I said, why do we call them actively disengaged? They said, because they don't just sit miserable in their office. They go up and down the halls and try to get other people as miserable. But here's what you have to know as far as productivity. So you got 30, 50, 20. The things that you want are great customer relationships with your employees. You want high productivity. You want low health care costs. I mean, these are the big ones. And you want safety. Guess where all the bad numbers are with the miserable, and lawsuits too. So there's 5 whoppers. Those are in the 20%. Up in the 30%, those people don't need anything. They don't need health care. They don't even need vacation days. They don't want somebody to satisfy them because they're not trying to do that. So 30% isn't real good. I'll get this over with, Sara. But
no.
I got wrapped up.
I think people are enjoying it.
I got wound up. But you got 30% there. But there's some really, 3 of the best managed companies in America are Wells Fargo, PNC, and Mars. Those are 3 of the very best. There might be some better ones, maybe John Deere. I don't know about John Deere, but I know it's a good one.
I guess we have to hire you to find out.
That's all I have to say. But those companies drive the 30% to 60%, and everything changes. So their healthcare costs, their safety, and all of those issues. But imagine if the whole country, these numbers are tiny, if we could take the 30 million to even 50 million, we could outproduce China, to your point. Now, this is it. The rest of the world on full-time jobs, there's 5 billion adults in the world, 3 billion of them wish they had a full-time job. There's only 1.2 billion real jobs. ILO and OECD are reporting reckless numbers. Real unemployment's 50% of the world because they have all those part-time jobs in there and informal jobs, kind of a country club term that some British people came up with. That means you're selling flowers in traffic and all that. Those really aren't jobs. But of those people in real jobs, only 15% of them are engaged. So to your point that you made last night in here, we are twice as good as the rest of the world at engagement, but there's huge upside left.
And what do you see as a solution? Is it government policy? Does it start with a business? Does it start with education?
Government policy wouldn't have been the first thing out of my mouth.
Somebody has to do something.
No, I think we got to teach managers to manage differently. And if you said, this is pretty soft stuff, but if you sit somebody down, Jim's probably a pretty good manager, Sam's, all of us probably pretty, but we pull things off very differently. And one of the things we found is that if you determine his strengths and mine, and they're different, and we just make a plan on developing those, strengths develop infinitely where weaknesses actually never develop. Go check your management plans and your development plans. Most of you are working on developing weaknesses. I'll guarantee it in your shops. But if we switched, I think we'd get a big boom.
And more latte machines. Bill, from your perspective, I mean, give us the perspective of our competitiveness as it relates to labor and the average worker.
Well, the big thing that I see out there is we have an aging workforce. Take my union as an example. We have roughly 300,000 members here in the United States, 55,000 in Canada, and 30,000 in Australia. And the average age of the worker is 46 years old. Now that's old. And we got to get young. We have to attract younger people to take manufacturing and construction jobs. Not too many people out there want to work with their hands anymore. I mean, that's just the fact of life. I look at my start. I started 47 years ago as an apprentice. I was 18 years old. Now, the average age of our apprentices that come into our program are 27, 28. They want to try something else first before they decide on a career where they're actually doing physical labor. That's just the fact of life. And what we're doing to try to get around that is we're trying to, go to the high schools, go to the junior colleges and attract people to come into the workforce. And it's tough. It's tough. One of the big programs that we got now going on to recruit workers is our UAVIP program, Veterans in Piping. We're actually on 8 military bases around the United States training active service people for a career when they get out of the military to come right into our apprenticeship program. And it's been very successful. And like I say, we've literally taken maybe 500 or 600 young men and women through that program each year and bring them right in, but that's certainly not enough. The building trades, they have a program for recruiting. They call it helmets to hard hats, to get the military people, to get that younger workforce into the stream. And it's hard too to sell parents on it. A lot of the parents, they want to see their kids go to college. They want to see them with good jobs. And when they think about a manufacturing career, a manufacturing job, or a construction job, that's just not that's not in their way of thinking. They don't want to see their kids enter that. And so we try to make it more attractive. We roughly have 35,000 apprentices, and every apprentice you can go into your apprenticeship program. We locked into community colleges all around the country where you can get an associate's degree and your journeyman card when you get out of your apprenticeship. And it's been very successful. Like I tell everybody, you start today, you're on that floor, you're a worker. You can be a foreman, you can be a general foreman, you can work your way up. You can be a project manager. At some point, you could start your own company. And so you have to get that across to these young men and women that, hey, that working with your hands is a viable choice to go out and earn a good living and to get the American dream, because too many people have been shut out of it.
I wonder if wages have anything to do with it. What's happening with incomes across manufacturing and the sort of broader sort of stagnation we've seen?
Yeah, wages, I don't think wages are really a big deal nowadays. And one thing that we see too, it used to be, hey, join the union, you get good health care and a good pension. And it seems like the young people nowadays aren't that concerned about health care and a pension like the older generation where everybody, hey, let's get in the union, you'll get that health care, you'll build your pension. And I just don't see that the younger generation isn't in tune like the older generation was of stability. In fact, when we're trying to organize people like to come into the union, it seems like we have better success with the wives than the men we're trying to recruit, because they understand that the health care and the pension, and more so than they just don't seem to care that much about it anymore.
I wonder if it's an idea about technology, the fact that we think robots are going to be doing these jobs in several years.
Well, you know what? That's true too. And the keys to the future in the manufacturing industry and our industry, the construction industry, it's training and certification. You have to have a trained and certified workforce that can compete with anybody around the globe. That's just the bottom line. Our organization alone, we spend $250 million a year on training. And none of it's from the government. That's our money that's spent. It's our contractors and our owners' money that we invest in training. And we take a tripartite approach. And that's the owners, the contractors, and us. We all work together to get that project done. I mean, that's unheard of 20 years ago. That would have been totally unheard of. The union and the contractors or the employers, they were never on the same page. It was always an adversarial relationship. And I always think about politics. Now, when we need something, we go in to meet with politicians on Capitol Hill. We'll walk in there with the owners, and we'll walk in there together, and they think, wow, these guys are together. We have a partnership with the people that employ our members. We have to keep them competitive. I mean, that's the bottom line. You're competing in a global economy, and the unions have to work with the employers to keep them competitive. It's as simple as that. It all starts when the employer gets a contract. And you know what? We have to make sure that they are successful getting the contracts, and we certainly can't price them out of it.
So what is the status of that relationship right now? How much work needs to be done?
Well, I've been pushing it for 10 years, and we're pretty far along as far as working on the partnership. And we do joint strategic planning with our employers all the time. We started that 5 or 6 years ago. I think we were one of the first unions to do strategic planning with our employers. And we do it all over. We do it at the local union level. We do it at our international union level. And it's a lot of benefits. We've created a lot of benefits for our employers. You talked about the 30% that show up and don't want to do the job. Well, every industry has that, and I don't like to think it's 30% in our industry, but we have people that show up with the wrong attitudes on the job. You know, they sit there, they complain about everything, they bitch and moan, and everybody got them. And we put together a program, it's called the Standards for Excellence, and it's about the worker behavior on the job site, what the owner expects. If you're working for a contractor, what the contractor expects. And it's a code of excellence that we follow, and we enforce it. So it's not like the old days when the union's business agents showed up out on the job blowing smoke in your face and telling you this is the way it is. I mean, we work with the owners and the contractors to the best of our ability to make them competitive and keep them in the game.
Sam, I wonder what your reaction is to that. What you think when you hear him talk about labor issues?
Well, I wish he was the leader of the union that we deal with. But we actually, I shouldn't say it that way, because we do have a pretty doggone good relationship with our, we've got unions in most of our plants all around the world. But here in the U.S., our number one represented group would be the United Auto Workers. We've gone through both ends of that spectrum. We, in the 90s, there were long strikes, almost took the company under. And there were lessons learned from that. And then we started down a path of win-win. And it took leadership on both sides. We were fortunate at the time, the UAW leadership was a person that started their career at John Deere. And so there was an element of trust there. And I think to Bill's point, part of that is you have to really work in the relationship between the management and the union and build that trust. And you know, I don't think it's something that you can ever put on autopilot. You've got to keep moving it forward. But I do have, I mean, we see examples all over, not just Deere, everywhere, examples of enlightened leadership, like what Bill's talking about, where it's a very positive relationship. But we also have other areas, we can see them, where, you know, there's still a very adversarial relationship, and that a lot of times results in, instead of win-win, win-lose type of relationships. And normally in those situations, whoever lost last time, the next person loses the next time. And so it's just not a good way to run.
Take turns. Jim, have you done any work on sort of what that does to productivity and to the organization?
Yeah, we'll see if this fits with Gallup or not. What we actually do as a part of our, we're about ready to enter another contract this September in 2015, and we've already started working on it. And we do 6-year contracts so that we really keep things stable for a long period of time. And we commit to, here's what we think the total cost can go up. A part of letting it go up by this much is we get a commitment out of the union to work with us on 4% per year real productivity gains. And we work on that together, and we have what we call continuous improvement. But we bring, what we found is employees, you know, they don't want to just work on the line anymore. They want to have an opportunity to control their environment. So we meet every day in teams talking about how you make the job better, how do you make it safer, all that. They implement projects, all that type of thing. And we are pretty well tracking to that 4% real productivity gain year over year. Again, but you have to get the commitment out of people to do something like that. But we have been able to enable that, and that's why a plant in East Moline, Illinois, making combines, can deliver a combine to Argentina more cost effectively than our plant in Horizontina, Brazil.
Jim, what have you found on this?
Well, the number of people that are miserable is 20%. It's actually the same with when you break out unions, private unions, it's the same. It's about 30, 50, 20, whether you're a union member or a Google worker, about the same. The only place where you see a difference is with the federal government. So they're a little bit lower on all of them, with the exception of, there's a question about rich mission and purpose. These people have a rich mission and purpose, but they have a worse attitude toward work. But other than that, it's pretty average. I was just thinking about what Bill said about pay. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but some other academics took Gallup data, and super economists, Angus Deaton and Danny Kahneman, and some names you really like. But they found that satisfaction with life, where you feel it, you say, well, how much pay do you need? Where's the threshold? The answer is $75,000. And so, so when you have pay and benefits, and I don't know if we can get everybody to that, so more people go into the kind of job, there might be a solution in there somehow. The average, I asked the superintendent of schools here, a really dandy person, whatever her name is, Henderson. Average pay for teachers is $98,000 in this town. That's average. It's higher than that in New York. I mean, you could argue, well, maybe that's a little bit too much. But when we're talking about income and who should make how much and all that, there's a really important number in there, and it's 75,000. So it means Sam's happiness. I don't know how much he gets paid, but he peaked out at 75,000.
I think I still got happier.
We won't make you answer that. How much of this all is, Bill, do you think, damage from the Great Recession, and sort of when it comes to wages, when it comes to changes in manufacturing? In other words, I'm trying to get at whether these are secular changes, whether they're more permanent, or whether it's just part of the cyclical process.
Well, it really hurt us. We were devastated by the recession, especially in the construction industry, and especially in the plumbing that we do, and also the fire protection, because there was no building going on, no residential, no commercial. We were totally devastated. But in the heavy industrial, in the infrastructure, in the energy sector, we were pretty busy during the recession. It kind of floated our boat during the whole recession. But it had a major impact on us, because during the recession, like I said earlier, we have an aging workforce, and our apprenticeship programs are the lifeblood of our industry that put the people in there. And during the recession, we didn't start a lot of young people into the trades because there weren't that many jobs. And then everybody, if you were a journeyman, you were starting 25 apprentices, people looked at them as, hey, what do you start new people for when we got 40% unemployment? But you have to have the young people to keep the contractors and the owners and also the companies competitive. You have to have a lower rate. You can't just go out and do a job with all journeymen, with everybody making 40 bucks an hour. You need a blended rate. And a lot of people don't understand that. But now we're starting to recover from the recession. I got a major push on to get more young people in the organization. I'm mandating that every local union, if you have 1,000 members, that you're going to have 20% apprentices. So 200 apprentices. We got to get the young people into the organization. And as far as the recession, hey, it's over and done, thank God, and let's move forward. But we learned a lot during that recession too, how to get lean and mean, and how to work more cohesively with the people that employ our members.
You mentioned the average age, how it's a problem in terms of who's coming into the factories for work. Is that a global phenomenon, or is that something unique to the United States?
No, I can only speak for like Canada and Australia, and in Canada, work is booming. I mean, they cannot get enough workers in Canada. It's a real problem. Australia's booming too. And it seems like the whole world economy is being driven by energy. And it really is. And the workers, it's tough. Like I say, it's just hard to recruit workers. Now, that being said, in some parts of the country, if we're going to put on 200 apprentices, we have 2,500 people apply for them jobs, like in Chicago or Boston or New York, the big cities. But when you get out to rural America, and like especially along the Gulf Coast, we have trouble recruiting people. trouble finding people to come into the union.
I'm wondering how the energy revolution in this country has helped you and has sort of helped manufacturing at large in this country.
It's helped an enormous amount manufacturing, and you know, with the price of gas now and all the newfound oil and everything else we got going on, we just got to get some of these politicians to start letting these pipelines go, like the Keystone.
That's a big deal for you.
Pardon?
That's a big deal for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The Keystone Pipeline, it's like a root canal that won't end. It's been going on for 5 or 6 years. Hey, that oil's coming out of the ground, and it's going to get to market. It's either going to get to market by rail or by truck or by pipeline. Pipeline is the safest way to transport it. And you know what? Right now, the rail is having with all the oil that's being shipped by rail, it's having a huge effect on the farmers in this country getting their products to market. Not only big delays in railroad crossings, it's ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. And the environmentalists, hey, God love them, but you have to, if you can stop the oil from coming out of the ground, that's one thing, but you gotta go with pipelines to transport it. Now the Keystone Pipeline is the safest pipeline ever designed, got the best material, the most skilled workforce to assemble it, got 47 safety devices on its monitoring systems, and we're concerned about that. Why aren't we concerned about these pipelines that have been in the ground 20, 30, 40, 50 years and are leaking every day? I mean, that's where we should put our focus on, replacing antiquated pipelines. People forget pipelines are part of infrastructure, and the pipeline infrastructure in this country is really in bad shape, and that's what we should be focused on.
Sam, I would imagine you agree.
Yeah, for a number of different reasons. If I were to take, you know, our number one customer base, farmers, Bill's 100% right. There is a real question in the Dakotas whether they're going to be able to get the grain to market, because all the rail cars are tied up from the standpoint of oil, shale oil, bringing out of the ground and transporting it. So they literally we could have a whole half of a crop sit wasting there. So there's an element from that standpoint. Second, there's no doubt that this energy boom has paid a big dividend, and what Bill's alluding to, it could pay an even bigger dividend if we were to get real solid policies in place and allow the long-term competitiveness to continue to increase. You know, right now there's still so many things in flux, including the infrastructure to get it out. Are you going to allow fracking in states or not? All those things, if we could get that behind us where it was solid policy in place that people could accept, and then really let the energy boom move forward, what it would do to help American competitiveness is pretty doggone significant, as well as lower costs for everybody. So.
What are we going to have to wait? What about a Republican Senate? Will that do the trick, or are we going to have to wait till 2016?
I don't know. This is not trying to get around the question. I don't know what it will take, you know, to get that all done, because there are so many other dynamics involved there. Certainly, that potentially could alter the game, but. You know, in the meantime, all you can do is continue to go and try to make the case for everybody and make sure people understand the entire picture. But it is going to take some leadership change, that's for sure.
Jim, what are you finding at Gallup in terms of what we've seen in the last few years, the boom in energy, fracking, shale gas in this country, and how that's reshaping the entire competitive landscape of the U.S.?
A real blind spot that leadership has, to Bill's point, is that when you start to release energy, you can't believe the energy that's released in the community. The most inspired population of people in the world, including Singapore or Sweden or Switzerland, is where? North Dakota. And this is like two different planets, North Dakota and Illinois. The most miserable tribe of people is Illinois. They know that they're not going to turn that around. California is in the same kind of place. But the attitude is serious. It's not like different states, it's like different planets. And like what Bill says, if that pipeline, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can consider, environment and all that. I'm in a business where you consider inspiration and you consider well-being and enthusiasm about being an American and not wanting to move and all that. And when that stuff starts, here's a really good question to ask anybody or ask yourself. Do you think the best part of your life is behind you or ahead of you? And behind you is a really bad answer. Energy changes that one.
I'm glad, just everybody was looking at me when you talked about Illinois. I just want everybody to understand, I live in Iowa. I don't live in Illinois.
Oh, no, I know that.
I'm from Illinois.
He's from Illinois.
I live in Illinois.
Sorry.
But you know, we've been talking about energy. We've talked a little bit about infrastructure. You know, the list goes on and on. What would, if you had a choice of the to-do list, what would be the top priority, Sam, for the U.S. government? Is it taxes, reform the corporate tax code? Is it immigration? I mean, there's so many things that could increase our competitiveness.
Yeah, I would not like to just start with one, but if I had to pick one, I actually think I would do the immigration one first.
Why?
I think getting the ability to get highly skilled people into this country and on a permanent basis is it will do more to unlock our potential. And you know, while I would like the tax reform, while I would like regulatory reform, like infrastructure, all those things will have an effect over time. I think the immigration reform, you know, the idea that you put a green card with somebody that's coming out of one of our great universities and immediately they start a business or they go to work in a research job, that can have a much more instantaneous impact, in my opinion.
Jim, how much is that costing us, the fact that we don't have that?
Well, if you tie in, the worst metric I've found in this town of really good solid data is that there's 6 million operating businesses in America. Of the 6 million, 4 million are mom and pop shops. They have an average of 1.4. They're not really businesses. They're people that want that lifestyle. So let's just take those out. So you got 2 million. You have 1 million between 4 employees and 10. You have about 600,000 between 10 and 20, and you have about 500,000 between 20 and 100. Then it really tanks. You've only got 80,000 between 100 and 500, and only 18,000 between 500 and 10,000. That's like where Gallup is, between 500 and 10,000. These jumbo firms of 10,000 or more, and 10,000 is not that big of a number. There's only 950 of them in the country. But the point is that that 2 million under the jumbos is really important because that's the only reliable place you can find new jobs. So the number of new firms, and this is a census from this government, so the range of error is kind of zero. 500,000 new firms start, 400,000 die. Net of 100,000 feeds that 2 million ecosystem that's really fragile and is the source of about $16 trillion of stuff. 4 years ago, so it's going along at 5, and that pretty much feeds it and keeps it going. 4 years ago, those lines crossed like an X. So now we're starting 400,000 and 500,000 are dying, which means now we're at a negative 100. Actually a negative 200 because we were up 100. So if you were ever going to short the country, you'd short it based upon that. When you ask people what's happened to their aspiration, why they didn't quite jump, the first word out of their mouth is not that I couldn't get the money or bankers wouldn't loan me money. This is a huge blind spot with most leaders. What they do is they feel there's a wet blanket. We go, really, what is the wet blanket? What's bothering you if it's not loans? And they say regulations. Until regulations are unraveled, or at least the perception of them, and it's not just federal, the city and state are crushing them too. Until we do that, I don't think we're going to get startups again. I studied it, by the way, the new governor of South Dakota doesn't have energy yet, and they're booming. That's a good place. First thing he did, I don't know if he's a Democrat or Republican, but he unraveled 3,700 laws. Now, I don't know how much difference they made, but see, business people will say, oh my gosh, somebody's finally on my side, they're lifting the blanket. Now I start a construction company and all those kind of things.
Do you include Obamacare in that regulatory burden?
It's the worst of all. We say, tell us about some of them that are bothering you. The first one that they say is health care.
Is it because they don't understand it or because their costs are rising?
That's a very perceptive question. And remember, both of them count. I think they don't. I think a big part of it is they don't understand it because we ask them some questions about it, and you can tell. But what they don't understand, they know is bad. They don't. It's not that they don't understand it and think it's great for them.
Interesting. Bill, your take? What's on your wish list?
Me?
Yeah.
One thing I think that we should focus on here is our infrastructure. You know, you see the graphs and everything. We're the best nation in the world. We're #1 in the world. Yet our infrastructure is under decay. It's on the decline. And you know, we're here in Washington, D.C., and you'd think that the Congress could get together on an infrastructure bill of some kind to replace the infrastructure that's worn out in this country.
How bad is it?
But they can't do it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You have to have some agreement on something. And if we want to remain the #1 nation in the world, we have to have the #1 infrastructure in the world. And we're far from it. Infrastructure is critical to the future of this nation. And it's getting more critical every day. And another thing that's big is the workforce. Again, I'll go back to the workforce. We have to have the qualified young men and women get into manufacturing and construction jobs. We have to entice them to come into this industry, because you have to have people to do the work. You can have all the foremen and supervisors and project managers in the world. You have to have somebody on that line that's building something, or you have to have someone out on the job site that's putting in pipe or whatever you're putting in, doing the electrical work. So I see them are the two critical things, is recruitment of more young people into working with their hands and infrastructure here in the United States.
You know, Sam, I listened to Bill, and it's funny, in the media, we talk about, with the improvement of the economy, how more jobs are being created in manufacturing as a share of the economy than previously. The fact that there's a manufacturing renaissance, is that a mirage?
I don't know that your data, probably you could answer better. I don't know that it's a mirage, but I don't think it's as strong as what's indicated. I would like, and maybe you have the data, you know, of the jobs in manufacturing that are being created, I'd still like to know how many of them are part-time. Because I at least the industries I see, as manufacturing's going on, we're hiring a lot of contingent workers. And I don't know if you have any data that relates to that, or if you would have a different opinion, but.
I think that
He has numbers for everything.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, though, when you said the reason why unemployment, you know, why they say, well, it keeps getting better, we've turned the corner and all that, that's because a whole bunch of real crappy jobs have been created that nobody wants, and that doesn't serve you, that doesn't serve anybody. But I do think, Sam, that where people predicted that manufacturing in the United States would be right now, you know, China's going to take all of our. I think we're in a lot better shape than what the economists were saying. I think that's the positive part.
I would agree. We prevented some of that, and you do talk about some companies talking about it coming back. I think, and there have been some. I think it's been a dribble so far, and we still need, whether it be regulatory reform, whether it be the tax reform. There's a number of those things that would allow the floodgate to open up, and you would see even more manufacturing come back if we could do it.
But like what Bill was saying, I mean, if we just boom fracking, boom cracking, boom nanotechnology, there's no limits to what right. America can do with jobs in either of those. And that doesn't even mention technology, but the amount. I mean, we could have at least a 20-year run with great manufacturing jobs in those two things. Then maybe they'd move on to Southeast Asia or somewhere. Something else would come along we'd get.
Well, we're talking a lot about supply. I mean, we haven't really brought up demand, the other side of the equation. The fact that we have a 4.2% GDP right now, though it doesn't feel like that to, it sounds like a lot of you. I mean, Sam, your farmers' incomes are down. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing on the demand side of things, which really ultimately is going to be the key for all of this?
We've been kind of going counter to the economy. We've had 3 or 4 very, very good years because farmers did extremely, extremely well, and with commodity prices going up. Now that commodity prices have gone very, very low, you know, we're seeing significant reduction in demand. We've had to lay off people in a number of our facilities because things are down. The other part of our business, construction equipment and turf business, is much more GDP oriented. We're starting to see it come back some, but it's still, to your point about the demand side, we would still say we're below an average year in both of those businesses, which says, and you're seeing it in housing starts, they're still well off of the 1.4, 1.6 million that somebody would say is normal. They're still, you know, roughly 900,000. So while we're seeing it come back some, and I have a tendency to be conservative relative to some of these things, we would still say we're going to keep one foot on the brake because the economy is still very, very fragile, and you could, while there's a lot of positive signs going forward, it only is going to take one of these things to derail it again.
Very cautious view. Jim, what's your sense of corporate confidence right now?
It's really low. I mean, it's about as low as you see it. By the way, the country, when you ask right track, wrong track, 75%, and this is as bad as you'll see it, think America's on the wrong track. I don't know if I answered the question you asked or not.
Is that CEOs?
Kind of, but CEOs and one-offs have it as low as we've ever seen it. Maybe tied with right around the crash, but the public, the general public, is at 75% wrong track, 22% or so right track. But I think the thing that concerns me about the question that you're asking, I guess, about GDP growth, when we say, again, I think we can turn the corner. So I don't mean, I'm very optimistic, but the GDP is now increasing at a decreasing rate, 2.2, 1.9, probably 1.5 or 1.6 this year. For the mathematicians in here, increasing at a decreasing rate is the same thing as negative. And if you said, where's the sweet spot? What can Americans do? We've got to get back to starting these new businesses, real firms, not the mom and pop shops, and we're not intentional about it. It's all that stuff is random. Innovation is highly systematic. But so if you take this room right here, if you bring educational psychologists in, they can line us all up from smartest to dumbest, highest IQ to lowest IQ, and be very, very accurate. People at the top can learn and recall better than the bottom part. So then we take those, send them to MIT, and they create a whole bunch of them, and then on to NASA or wherever, and create a whole bunch of innovation. And you know what it gets us? 0 jobs. Because we've got the wrong expectation for innovation. Innovation doesn't work to create jobs until there's a customer standing next to it. But so we put billions and billions and billions, I mean, literally hundreds of billions into innovation, and nothing's coming out of it. But we're geniuses. We're the best in the world. We've invented everything. Just get an almanac out and go through the last, all the inventions that are in there. God, Americans get them all. And if the Germans or somebody else got them, they don't really count. You know, it's a sewing machine or the swizzle stick or some kind. But we get the great ones. But the entrepreneurs, the people that, if you said, now line us all up by our ability to create a business model and a new customer, that's all left to randomness. But as soon as we make that as intentional as the innovation part, then I think we can turn that around. We can grow. I mean, we've got to grow at 2.5, or we're getting worse because we're not keeping up with population. But I think if we made that part intentional, Sara, I think you could jump quickly to 4%, or even, I mean, then you put all the other stuff into fracking and nanotechnology and all that. I don't think there's any limits.
And jobs and everything. No, it's a good point. I do want to open it up for the audience now while we have some minutes left. I know there are a lot of questions for the gentleman.
Bill,
Yes.
enjoyed your comments. I think you've been really right on today. But looking back in the last century, unions were incredibly important, especially in the first.
I think we have a microphone for you. There you go.
In the last century, unions were incredibly important. to people and giving them the rights on the job. Do you think today, with all the regulatory, that the unions have basically been replaced by regulatory to the extent that we don't even need unions anymore in manufacturing? And are they really even relevant going forward, given the new model that, you know, if you're a manufacturer, which I am, and I look out there and I see new regulations every day, you know, I'm thinking, you know, if the union came and visited me, it wouldn't be half of what the federal government's asking me to do for my people and for safety and everything else. And so, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're right to a certain point. But like in our union, like I said earlier, we're about training and certification and working with the owners to keep a competitive workforce in there. I think if more unions focus on being that type of a union, yeah, I think they would. But if they're focused on work rules and little grievances, in my union, we don't have grievances. There's almost no such thing as grievances. I mean, if we do a handful of grievances a year, that's a lot. In the old days, everything was grieved, and it was just a major rat's nest in them industries. And the union was two-blocking everything. It was stopping progress from happening. And, you know, people, they don't want change. Well, you have to change. I mean, if you don't change with the industry, if the industry doesn't change with the times, you're not going to be in business too long. And I think that the union leaders are starting to recognize that hey, we have to be flexible. We have to work with owners if we're going to remain a union, if we're going to represent the workers. And what benefits do unions have? Like I said, in our union, it's training, it's certification, our standard for excellence, our work rules, and we try everything humanly possible to work with them owners to make them competitive and to make sure that they pick up them jobs. Because without the owner getting a contract, we're not going to work. It's as simple as that. And I think unions, they have a necessary place in the private sector for sure. For sure, but it's not the unions that you're talking about 100 years ago or 50 years ago. It's the unions of today. It's the unions of today because it's collective bargaining, everybody working together for the common good. And I mean, people nowadays, I think they get it. And our union members, they get it a lot better than they used to. I mean, they really do. They want to work. They want to come up with ideas to streamline projects. You know, even our industry, we're predominantly construction industry, but that's changing too. Now, you know, years ago, everything come in, pipe, fittings, valves, you'd put it together on the job site. Now everything's coming in modularized. I mean, people are manufacturing the modules in the shops and sending them out, and we're installing them. Rack mounted, skid mounted. And so really the construction jobs that are out there, we're losing them left and right because of new technology, and the new technology is the manufacture of this type of skid-mounted equipment and sent into the shop. So we are pushing very big to get into that manufacturing of the skid-mounted equipment into the modular systems. Because if you read it, they're building cities in China modular. I mean, right now, like in some big hotel chains, they'll put in a whole modularized bathroom with everything all hooked up, and all you got to do is connect the pipe. I mean, that's the future, and I think my union, I know, is changing with the times. And I think we can still be competitive and be a force. In fact, this is our 125th year of being a union, and I see us around for the next 125 years. But if we continuously change with the times. But if we're stagnant and not going to work with the people that employ our membership, we'll be gone tomorrow. It's as simple as that.
Good point.
Ashma Hudson, UC Davis. I have many questions, one for each of you, including the moderator.
That's their job.
Yeah, it is on.
Oh, okay. The problem is, we say college education everybody should have. I think it's a wrong policy. Everybody should have capability to make a living, whether through, you know, the union type job or welding or something like that. What is happening is the country is acquiring a lot of student loans and debts. The students that are coming out won't have jobs. They won't be able to pay their debts. The public will have to assume those debts. That's one thing. STEM education hasn't worked. I disagree with Sam that STEM has worked because the problem is not in the universities. The problem is in the K through 12. The quality of education that we are providing is poor in the high schools and lower. Universities have to make up what they don't know when they come to the university, and that's waste of resources. Second, NNMI is a solution for big companies. It's not a solution for small companies. In regional, some places it may work because small businesses need support for research complexities. And these, you know, the one you look at the NMI in North Carolina on large bandgap semiconductors, it will serve Cree, but not small businesses. And then what is happening is economy is expanding, but jobs are not expanding because IT is involved in manufacturing extensively. So jobs are not commensurate with expanding economy. There may be a problem if you look at the future. If people have different qualities of capabilities, some of the people may not be able to join the economy as an employee. They may go on welfare right from the beginning. So the issues are very complex, and we have simplified too much that immigration will solve this, and we have serious problem in education. Look at Finland. Finland has high quality high school teachers. They do very well in the education side. So we should look at very carefully where we need concerted effort to build the country. And we should have bold initiatives, but these slogans, everybody should go to college, NMI will solve the problems, it's not true. So what we may need is regional research service laboratories. I have been talking on this Council on Competitiveness for this, but it had no traction so far. So
I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No,
if you want to get to a question, because I want to take others too.
I wrapped it up. Already.
Okay. Microphone. I think we have one here and we have one here too.
Jim, is this one on? Jim, I wanted to say that your comment about linking innovation to the marketplace is really, I think, right on the mark. It's one of the most important things that the council can contribute. Some of that's happening at the regional level. We have something in Ohio for the Ohio Business Roundtable. We're looking at the growth industries, and we're trying to align what's happening in the universities and in the high schools with what's needed in terms of talent development and also R&D connection with industry. But there isn't really a national plan. And I think one of the exciting things about the council is this is a venue where you can do that. Can you expand upon how you think we can do better in linking innovation with the marketplace?
This country is so good at a few things. I mean, the arts. Boy, if I come out of high school and I can sing, if I can act, if I can play a violin, I get spotted so quickly, and my learning gets accelerated. And that's one of the reasons the world produces, you know, sort of all the arts for the whole world. But I mean, way above the 300 million people, or the 4.5% that we are. If I'm a running back out in, you know, West Oklahoma or somewhere, yeah, the whole state's talking about me. People work on my development. I get treated differently, and I become something very, very, very special. If I'm an entrepreneur, we don't have a way of recognizing me, and it's probably a different neuron configuration, just as clear as IQ. One of the problems that universities have is that they believe it can be trained, and they're wrong. You're absolutely born with it. can't train it. But it needs to be masterfully developed, just like a great violin player that, you know, that has an incredible ear. But we don't have a way of identifying them. So we interviewed thousands and thousands of masterful entrepreneurs, ones that didn't make it and then failed, then you do make a profile. It looks like it's 5 in 1,000 can build an organization, not an innovator, they have nothing in common, unique, different neuron configurations, but they can build an organization of infinite size. So there's about 15 million kids in high school. So if it's 5%, drop the 3 zeros, it means there's about 75,000 kids roaming the streets and hills of the United States. By the way, you don't show any difference at all. No significant difference between men and women. Women aren't in this at all. They need to start more businesses. Same thing with minorities. IQ kind of cruelly follows upper income and some things like that. People don't want to write it down. God was much more egalitarian when he was handing out this particular gift. But if we found those 75,000 and put them in those universities and said, do all your development with these, it'd be like if you and I were starting an NFL team and we said, we don't really care how fast you can run, how hard you can hit, your upper body strength. We're not going to do that. We believe anybody can be an NFL player. That's what we're doing with entrepreneurship. You say, well, 75,000, is that enough? 75,000 is a big number, but also 2 in 100 can develop something between 2 million and 50 million. You need all of those too, or you don't get that big number of organizations between 20 to 100, which is a real sweet spot.
I just want to say that there's something called Venture for America. I don't know if you know it. Cincinnati is the anchor city in that, where you identify some of those kids with that neuronal network. You link them with mentors, CEOs in the company, and with universities. So you might want to.
Another thing you can do is I think you can spot the behaviors. You know, in hockey, they'll see a kid in grade school. They can tell by the way they skate, and they also can tell by their eyes. And they haven't even tested them, but they started some kid in the NHL recently at 16, but they started developing him in grade school. But when you see, I watched, you know what Lemonade Days is? It's a program here for low income. I saw a little girl and she started selling lemonade. So it's a program that George Washington, some brilliant people at George Washington do here. And she made $700 over a weekend. But when she sold that lemonade and got that $5, lightning went through her body and she'll never be the same. But it didn't go through other kids. Other kids were nervous and they were scared. They didn't really want to do it. They couldn't really stand at the front. It wasn't too hard to spot. You did without testing. I'll guarantee that that little girl can build, will, especially if developed and recognized, and can build something of infinite size. But we could be watching for it more clearly too.
Good morning, I have a question. Hi, way over here.
Oh, got one in the back, yeah.
Way in the back, stand up. My name's Eva Sage Gavin, and I'm the Vice Chairman of Skills for America's Future at Aspen Institute. I want to congratulate you on your comments today. But I also want to talk about, especially for my friend from Gallup, strengths-based. And the idea that we've got 1A report from the Clarion Call this morning, and it's extraordinary about these manufacturing hubs. So I would love to tap into your wisdom. I've been able to participate in Skills for America's Future. We launched in 2010. We have 300 partnerships up and running. Community colleges, extraordinary CEOs and thought leaders, organizations like this. But we do lack a national network. So can you share any ideas with us how to take this A grade? Could we take it to other industries? Could we put our forces together with these amazing CEOs, our labor partners, our thought leaders, and take this page and get these C's to A's? So I'd welcome any of the panelists' advice on this, because we have emerging excellence. How do we work together and drive it across the country? Thank you.
Anybody?
I don't have an answer for it, so.
The main thing is the trick is to find a kid's strength. So let's say they want to become some kind of a world's greatest construction person. They want to start in manufacturing or whatever it is. Internships change lives. And in high school, so we do our national poll of the 50 million kids K through 12. There's only 5% of them in meaningful internships. If you just doubled that, I mean, if you had some kind of a network, I mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like if you had 50%. In good colleges, we have this thing called the Gallup Purdue Index. In good colleges, kids that are in meaningful internships in American colleges is 22%. That one should be 100, and that would change America. But thank you very much. But the trick is you've got to put them in jobs that they have, where the task at hand, they have a capacity to perform. I think that's your point about strengths. But see, in internships, I'm not that good of a manager, and I intern some people, but it's not that hard to figure out what they can do and can't do. But if you get their trains on the right track, I think they all can make $75,000 or a lot more.
We have one in the front here.
Right, I'd like to follow up. Okay, hi. Nancy Smith-Nisley, N2 International Solutions and advisor to the council. There's been a lot of discussion here about the misery index. I think, Jim, you said 20% of workers are miserable in their jobs. I'd like to know, how does this relate to all these hundreds of thousands of millennials, the 20-somethings, who were born and raised in the technology age, who have degrees and advanced degrees, and are either unemployed or underemployed? How do we fix this?
Well, I think, by the way, I think some of it was just in the, if you take the millennials, there's a huge opportunity here. I dreamed of being an NBA player, which that went away very quickly, but so did all my friends. and my daughters all dreamed that they were going to be singers and actors and all that, actresses and all that kind of stuff. But with America's millennials right now, when you ask them, do you believe that you'll invent something that changes the world? 50% of them hit that like a 60-pound muskie. That is a big dream. And that's a real positive about where the millennials are with technology. And then, so who they emulate is changing. This one is really good. I want to start my own company. It's also 50%. Now it's very fragile because they get into college and it starts going away. And it'd be better if you could hold that aspiration. I think one of the reasons it goes away is because we're not giving them enough support. The university's biggest failure, in my opinion, is that when you ask students, do you have a professor that took a special interest in you? That number is incredibly low. Professors, can you imagine if Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons took that over and started treating students like customers, how they could change that? Hell, you'd drive it up to 80, 90%. Good universities, I'm not going to say names, good universities have that thing at about 15%. But I think there's an awful lot of low-hanging fruit where we can improve development of millennials. But they're psyched, they're ready, they're inspired, and much more so than other countries.
But unemployed.
Pardon me?
But unemployed in many
Yeah.
cases. We're underemployed.
Yeah, but I think that the solution lies within the only place you can reliably find good new jobs is in new business startups of firms, not mom and pop shops. That's the only place. But most of these kids, they're starting the good ones when they're very young. I mean, look at all these, I mean, everybody knows Microsoft and Intel and the Google guys and Dell and all that. And none of those guys have college degrees, not one of them. And they got a market cap, you know, that's bigger than most countries. I mean, well over $1 trillion, be bigger than, you know, only 10 countries would be as big as that. But those kids can create their own jobs if we develop them around those two incredible. One aspiration is innovation. I believe I'll invent something that changes the world. The other one is about those are the two most valuable aspirations that millennials can have, and they've got them. We just got to develop them better. And by the way, I don't agree with you on public schools. I just got to say one thing, and on what. You've got to drop out big city public schools. It's not fair to trash the public schools. And I'm no big supporter. I don't have any dog in this hunt at all. But when you drop out the big city public schools, our schools are fantastic. And we're even making improvements, and I have nothing to do with this, with dropout rates. The improvements that this country's making, they were horrible. A third of all high school kids don't graduate, and 50% of minorities don't graduate. Those things are improving like crazy. But at that very top, in those best I'm talking public schools, not private schools. We are masters of development up there. It's not fair to public schools to lump them all together because, you know, Chicago public schools, they're horrible. New York there's no other side to it. New York public schools are horrible. Washington's have been horrible. They're improving really fast right now. But when you lift those out that have just been destroyed, our public schools are very good.
Sam, did you have something on
Well,
millennials?
Not on underemployed part, but what we have found with millennials, and this comes out in our engagement scores and everything else that we look at, the two things that have resonated more with them, we have articulated our higher purpose, committed to those linked to the land, through that enable human flourishing. While everybody likes that, they really, and you have to walk the talk. I mean, it can't be a slogan. They're really, really, that's how we keep them wanting to work for us. But the second thing is we've been very, very purposeful about really supporting volunteerism, even giving you paid time off. If you work 40 hours for a charity, we'll put $1,000 to the charity, those type of things. That has been, while it's resonated with a lot of people, it really resonates with them. And so on a number of different things where it's harder to get the millennials engaged in, once you add those components to it, it gets back to this idea of changing the world. You can just see they want to have an impact. And we find that, quite frankly, be true in almost every one of our locations around the world. It's not a U.S. phenomenon.
Bill, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about education in high school. You know, I'm an older guy, another generation, and when I was a young man, there were vocational schools all over. I grew up in Chicago and went to private school, but the public schools, every other school was a vocational school. And you know what? Over the last 20, 30, 40 years, the great majority of them have closed down. And the vocational schools would teach you how to work with your hands. And they're eliminated now. And young students today don't have access to vocational schools. It's almost like, hey, that's not even part of the equation here. I'm going to go to college, I'm going to work on computers, and that's going to be it. And you talk about, you know, like I mentioned, our apprenticeship program, which is an internship. But you talk about that, and like I said, in Chicago, where I'm from, my local, it's a good local, and they always have 2,500 people that sign up to go into the apprenticeship, and now that 2,500 people, half of them, maybe not half, but at least 40%, have four-year college degrees that were out in the workforce, that lost their jobs. Now they want to get in and become a union pipe fitter. And that's a fact of life. I think that we're missing the boat in this country by not having more vocational schools and earmark kids at a young age and say, hey, look, this is where we're going to head you off to be. And a lot of countries do that, Germany being one of them. I mean, they pigeonhole them kids when they're like in the 6th grade and where they're going to be. Now, if there's somebody's misclassified or something, he's not there forever. I mean, that's not the case. But I think we have to get our young men and women, and we have to get them engaged in a manufacturing or a construction industry, because you always have to have people that can build something. I mean, that's what it's all about. And if we don't, we'll have to bring in foreign labor from all over the world to start doing our building if we don't develop them here in the United States.
Okay. If we could, two quick ones.
Don Manzullo, first of all, I would disagree that the recession has ended, but coming from Illinois, I guess we are the exception. Second of all, when gasoline is $3.50 to $4 a gallon, people have no extra income to buy other products. It's just that simple, especially people that live in small towns and have to travel 30 miles each way to get into a bigger city. Third thing is the federal government has between 30 and 40 job training programs. About a third of them have been audited. The only job training program that works, and all three of you agree with it, if it's done on a local basis with input from the industry that needs the jobs. Thank you.
Anybody? Should we move on? Get a final question in? This gentleman has been waiting for a while over here.
From a different perspective, the National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health are agencies that invest in innovation and research and creativity. Are businesses investing in research now, or is that going up or down, or how do we ensure that what made the country great, our research and innovation, continues to grow?
That has your name on it.
Well, I can only speak for us. We have been for the last 5 years investing at record levels in research and development, 30 to 40% higher than any time in the past, and continue to do that. Part of that for us, you know, the world is becoming so much more competitive that if your products will get commoditized quicker and quicker and quicker by others, and the only way that you stay ahead of that curve is you've got to continue innovating and offering a value that the customer wants and is willing to pay for. But if the moment you become me too, you know, you're gone. So I know others, CEOs that I'm aware of, there would be the same thing. We're investing at very, very high levels in R&D.
All right, and just final thought, maybe just to wrap it up, because we've talked about what needs to be done and some of the problems, but to leave it on an optimistic note, if everyone could just share what you think our most competitive advantage is here in the United States. What do you think?
Well, it's, I think what Jim and others have talked about, you know, I think if you go just through our whole history, the people themselves, our ability to work with others, our ability to wanting to take risk, to get out there and do it is different than most other places around the world. And I think as a result of that, whether it's a big organization, the ability to align and get people highly engaged and motivated, whether it's a research organization, the ability to get people to creatively start thinking and wanting to innovate, whether it's an IT organization or whether it's a small entrepreneurial organization, the environment here in the U.S., culture, all are by far, in my mind, our greatest advantage.
Jim?
I was watching TV about 35 years ago, and there's a panel of economists, and they all said that United States GDP would fall to third behind Germany and Germany and Japan would out-manufacture us, higher quality and all that. They predicted that our GDP, that Japan would be at about 5 trillion, that Germany would be at about, I don't know, 3.5 or 3 3/4, and that we would be at about 3 right now. And everybody just kind of sat there, and I was thinking, oh my God, this ought to be on the front page. We're going to third. Of course, we bowed clear up over but it was an unbelievable 30-year run, probably the most exceptional time in the history of human development of the 200,000 years man and woman have been on the planet. And now, but we thought our way through it. But if you go to business school, nobody talks about it or teaches it. But whatever happened during that time, we've crashed back down again. But somehow Americans, you know, whether it was World War II, you know, won the Kinetic War, and then somehow the baby boomers came back. They don't get much credit for it, but they beat the crap out of Germany and Japan in the economic wars. Somehow we always, but if you were going to bet on one tribe of people to figure it out, take off again, I mean, of all the cards, if you were holding a hand of cards, you definitely want America's cards, not China's or anybody else's.
Bill, final thought? Greatest asset?
Yeah, I think that the future is going to be bright because, based on what Sam said, the American people, you know, we have the top universities in the world. We have our schools are great, our universities are tremendous. Our work ethic has been great. We work harder, we work longer than any other country in the world. Our productivity's always been up. Sometimes it slacks, but it's always been up. And I just think the American worker and the American people are geared up for the future. They like being the leaders, and they don't want to lose that. They want to stay ahead of the curve, be the #1 economy in the world. And I think everybody's geared up to see that happen. At least, you know, the problems continues to be the politics here right here in this city. I mean, we can't get along. I mean, if we could get along and drive the economy forward and actually agree to rebuild the infrastructure and do a lot of the necessary things here in this country, there'd be no stopping us. But
Right. Well, we'll leave it on the upbeat note. Thanks to our distinguished panelists. Thank you for the question.